Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of Fanboy Reviews Countdown. Today, we take a look at the top 10 worst Sega Genesis, aka the Mega Drive, worst games for the Genesis ever released. Number 1, Sonic 3D Blast, came out in '96. This was considered one of the worst Sonic games of all time. 3D Blast changes way too many things from what made the original platform game successful. The speed mechanics, the smooth level design, the bright visual colors, the exciting gameplay have all been taken away. Instead, we get this slow, bogged down fetch mission turdfest that feels more like an isometric, poor man's version of Mario RPG. 3D Blast is way too repetitive, drabby, and looking for enemies around the levels is just uninspired. What an awful game released very late in the Genesis lifespan. Ugh. Coming in at number 2, Streets of Rage 2. Came out in '92. Oh man, this game stinks. One of the crappiest beat-em-ups in history. This was the sequel to the 1991 game and was really more of the same nonsense. First of all, the gameplay is still the same button-mashing, simplistic combat that we've seen from many other games before, like Final Fight. That's right, it just rips off Final Fight by Capcom. It really offers nothing new to the arcade beat-em-up genre. I mean, the graphics sucked, it looks like some 16-bit crap from the 80s. The music is also the worst soundtrack ever on the Genesis, and one of the worst music soundtracks for any game of all time. Terrible songs, bad soundtrack, especially the boss fight music is really horrible. It doesn't even sound exciting or epic or anything like that. I mean, this was the final boss, and it sounds so lame. So, Streets of Rage 2, terrible. Coming in at number 3, Gunstar Heroes, came out in '93. This was developed by Treasure. Ugh, I've never even heard of them. But anyway, Gunstar Heroes. It's a side-scrolling shooter type of thing. It completely stinks compared to the more superior run-and-gun games like Metal Slug or Contra. I mean, those are really good ones. Gunstar Heroes, this is ridiculous. The storyline is some bogus, confusing mismatch of, crappy characters and fictional nonsense about some empire reviving the gold and silver or some crap like that. The weapons suck because there's only like 4 types. Force, Lightning, Chaser, Flame, which are all basically useless and they don't even sound cool. It's really basic. The graphics aren't memorable. The main characters are very generic, color-based protagonists. There's really nothing special about Gunstar Heroes. It's, you want to talk about milquetoast, bland, vanilla, no flavor. Coming in at number 4 is Shining Force 2. Came out in '93. This was an awful tactical RPG that was developed by Sonic Software Planning and features nothing but predictable gameplay. It plays too much like every generic tactical RPG ever. It's got the same class system, the abilities crap, the experience points, leveling up, attacking and the using spells, items, overdone combat. They got the square grid battle system, beating all the enemies, and then you have this thing with the light and darkness jewels, with a story, your castles, all the stuff, exploring these areas. You gotta defeat the enemy leader or, all of the enemies on screen to continue. Shining Force 2 is a very redundant RPG. We've seen this a million times, and it's nothing refreshing. Matter of fact, Shining Force, more like Shining Turds 2 for the Genesis. Coming in at number 5 is Comic Zone. Comic Zone. This one came out in '95. Developed by Sega Technical Institute. This is basically a beat 'em up about some doofus named Sketch Turner who gets sucked into a comic book and he has to fight bad guys inside the panels. It sounds pretty lame, and it really pretty much is. How many of these stupid beat 'em ups is the Genesis going to get? The Mega Drive, whatever you want to call it. I mean, these things are so repetitive and cheesy. The characters are always dressed like it's the 1980s or something like that. Anyway, you know, the whole comic book thing is just a gimmick. You got some nonsensical elements in the game, like a rat helps you out. A freaking rat on the floor. It's crawling around trying to fight bad guys. You got useless weapons and items, and it's just really short. It's a terribly short game. And it's way too easy. It's not challenging, basically. It could have been a lot more challenging, but it's only like 3 stages, so how hard can that be? This was never a famous game either, because it came out so late in the Genesis lifespan, so I guess that's one thing that I can say, is that not a lot of people even realize what this game was. Coming in at number 6 is Earthworm Jim from '94. Oh. Alright, this is where things get really wacky and stupid. You take a worm from the ground, you put him in a bodysuit, you give him a gun, and then have him trek across these platform stages and avoiding bad guys and weird enemies. It's dumb. I mean, it's created by Shiny and Playmates Interactive. You know, this was actually a home console game back in the day. This was a full-priced, and back then, you know, it took up a lot of space, memory size for a cartridge. But now you take a look at this game and it's a complete cheap, cheesy, it'd be one of those downloadable games that you bought from the PSN or the Xbox Arcade for like $2. And it would take up like a very small fraction of the memory size, and the whole thing is so indie and so amateurish. It's, you know, it's worthless adventure, dumb story, dumber character designs, annoying music and sound effects, terrible 16-bit garbage. Alright, coming in at number 7 is Golden Axe. Came out in '89. That's right, '89. This is probably the oldest game on this list. This was a hack and slash pile of trash that basically lets you control these Conan the Barbarian ripoffs mixed with, you know, Lord of the Rings type of thing. I mean, the whole scenario is this fantasy crap. It's not really fun, you know, it's not enjoyable, it's got no replay value. You know, you can only control a few characters, like 3 characters or something. You take a look at games like Dynasty Warriors. I mean, that's a real game. That's a real hack and slash. It's got plenty of characters to choose from. You know, you need at least like 6 or 7 to make hack and slash enjoyable, so that, you know, it doesn't get old. But I mean, with Golden Axe, it's like, you know, 3 characters and that's it. I mean, it's a port of the arcade game, and the Genesis version is even worse. The graphics are even more terrible looking. You know, it looks like an '80s game, so it doesn't look very fun now. Even back then, it sucked. It's a waste of time, and it's just way too easy. What a complete waste. Coming in at number 8 is Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Came out in '94. This was the 3rd game in the Sonic platforming series, which was a complete joke to begin with. I mean, first of all, they had Knuckles in the game. And Knuckles sucked major raccoon ads. Seriously, he looks like an orange rat with spiky hair. And he's supposed to be, oh, he's got a bad attitude. Oh, wow, how cheesy. The gameplay is more the same crap. The music, worse than before. You know, Sonic has been overexposed by, you know, '94. It's a one-dimensional speed run, one-trick pony type of experience. You play one Sonic, you play them all. This has been a pile of hedgehog excrement that's harder to clean up than Sega losing Extreme for the Saturn. Terrible. Coming in at number 9 is Ristar. Came out in 95. What can I say about Ristar? I mean, it's about a yellow star that walks around with hands and legs. It grabs poles, platforms, it stretches its hands for some reason, and then it flings itself across the screen towards enemies and other platforms. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the Sonic team was smoking when they were creating this game. They must have been on some seriously strong lung grass to come up with this kind of delirious intergalactic crap. Anyway, the game was not a big hit. The Genesis was pretty much on its way out by the 95, and they were already talking about the Saturn anyway, an upcoming, next-gen 32-bit system by, the mid-95. So I hope that nobody ever talks about Ristar or ever mentions it ever again. And to round out this list, number 10 is Aladdin. Came out in 93. This is one of the more infamous games of the 90s. Aladdin was basically released for many platforms, the NES, the Game Boy, the Amiga. But the Genesis version was the worst. Horrible animation style that it uses this thing called Digicel. Yeah, Digicel, which was just a complete gimmick from Disney. Yeah, the soundtrack sucked. It was not special. It was basically about as bad as smelling camel hump, because it doesn't even sound awesome or interesting. Not as good as Legend of Zelda soundtrack or Super Metroid. The action platforming thing is pretty much dated. It's not really fun. Especially next to games like Mario Galaxy and Donkey Kong Country Returns. Those games are way more superior if you want to talk about platforming. The graphics were mediocre for its time. It doesn't utilize the Genesis engine to its fullest. It felt very rushed. It doesn't even have any cutscenes. It's just horrible presentation. No video clips from the movie. Aladdin on the Genesis, complete waste. If you want a better version, get the one for the SNES. Yes, the Super Nintendo version of Aladdin. Much, much superior and way better. Alright, so that's it for this episode of Fanboy Reviews Countdown. And, taking a look at these worst Sega Genesis games, these are the top 10 most awful, most terrible, most atrocious release games on the Genesis, aka the Mega Drive, and do not ever bother looking at them again with the same nostalgia.